Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 10 Ways to Increase Team Transparency webinar. My name is Whitney, and I will be taking you through the webinar today. Now, we are going to get started in a few minutes. I do just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to sign on and get connected to the audio, With that said, if you're connected and online right now, can you go to the GoToWebinar chat and just type a little message to let me know that you can hear me and see my screen. So you can give me a little hello. You can even type in where you're located. I know we usually have attendees from all over the world, so always fun to hear from you all. Okay, awesome, wonderful. So it looks like everyone can hear me and see me. And for those of you that are curious, we really do have attendees from everywhere. We have some from the UK in London, Germany, Ontario in Canada, Arkansas in the US. And just to let everyone know, I'm based here in San Francisco in Front's headquarters, where it is finally sunny after a few weeks of rain. Oh, we even have someone from Ireland. That's awesome. Thanks, everybody. And we just had a question come in on the chat as well, saying, will there be a recording? And yes, there will be. So if you've registered for this webinar, as all of you have, you will automatically be emailed a recording of the session within 24 hours. If you have teammates as well that registered but cannot attend live, they will also receive a recording. So that will be sent out. Cool. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So quick introduction to myself. My name is Whitney. I'm a programs manager here at Front, and that is a part of our customer success team. I've been at Front for a little over a year now, which is very exciting. But my role is really to educate existing users and new users on the platform and give you a lot of kind of thought, I want to say thought leadership into the way that we built Front, why we built it that way, and how you can really leverage Front in the best way possible. And at Front, we love Legos. I know someone just said awesome pick. Yeah, so we love Legos. So that is my little avatar for the day. Every new employee at Front gets to pick a Lego set that they can then build. So if you ever visit our Front office, you'll notice that there's just these gigantic, amazing Lego sets everywhere. So that's a little fun tidbit. So quick overview of how today's session will work. If you have questions, please ask them in the chat. That same location where you all have already been typing in is where I will be monitoring questions throughout the session. With that said, there will be a lot of time for open Q&A at the end, so you can also choose to save your questions to the end of the session. And as I mentioned earlier, you will receive a recording of the webinar if you have to leave early, or maybe you'll get another cup of coffee. I totally understand. Or maybe for those of you in the EU, it might be happy hour time. Don't worry, you can say goodbye whenever you want, and you will get a recording. And an agenda of our session. So today's webinar is really focused on transparency, obviously, but looking at team transparency from both a company cultural level and also from a product level with Front specifically. So what is transparency and why is it important to organizations? Why is it something that has really become such a hot term to make sure that you're engaging with employees and creating the best workplace culture? So we'll look at both of those initially. We'll then go into those 10 pointers of how to lead your team with transparency. And as I mentioned at the very end, we will have time for open Q&A. So a brief agenda of today. So what is transparency? And I don't know about all of you, but I see the word transparency coming up more and more in a lot of publications and articles related again to creating the best workplace environment. It seems to be something that has gained traction over the last couple of years and something that is really important to a lot of growing and established organizations. So at Front, we really value transparency. And this is actually a quote from Mathilde, our co-founder and current CEO, where she just shares that transparency really makes everyone more effective and efficient. Eliminating those kind of power barriers are what we need to be successful. And as she says at the end, reduce internal politics and strife. So a little idea into kind of how transparency was baked into our core values at Front initially and into our product as well from our CEO's own words. Now, why is transparency important? So there are a couple of reasons why transparency is really important, particularly in this workplace setting. And I'm going to go into all three of these in a few other slides, but on a very basic level, there's actually been data and studies that show that employees are losing trust in their employers. I know that sounds kind of weird, but when you don't have those clear communication or the ability to understand different actions or reasoning, when the transparency is not inherently built into a culture, it can create a very distrustful work environment, particularly for employees and their management as well. There's also been studies that show that internal transparency translates to happier employees as well as higher employee engagement. So breaking down these barriers, making sure that you're showing all reasoning and all kind of, I guess, goals, I want to say, are really key to making sure that employees are trusting, happy, and engaged when they come to work. So as I mentioned, the study that I wanted to pick for this first one is by the American Psychological Association, and it actually found that a fourth of employees don't trust their employer, which is actually fairly high in my opinion, especially when you're going to a workplace every day and really dedicating the majority of your time during the week to working towards a specific organization. That can obviously be very difficult if you're not trusting the employer. A lot of individuals, 1 in 3, feel that their employer is not always honest or truthful. And this obviously leads to very unhappy employees, unfortunately, who don't feel invested in the business and thus aren't probably performing or giving their all to their day-to-day activities at work. Additionally, internal transparency is positively correlated with happier employees, which is awesome. So when you do have a transparent workplace, it can lead to really happy, engaged employees, which is what we all want, right? So 94% of employees who reported a transparent management workplace said they were also really happy. So another kind of data point just to show that when you do have this really open environment, employees are really benefiting from that. They're happier, engaged, and working towards the goals of the company, probably in a much better fashion. And as I mentioned, this drives employee engagement. So of course, along with engaged employees that are continually kind of happy, you're also going to get a lot of fruitful outcomes from that, whether that be more creativity from different users or maybe increased alignment across teams with that open communication. So a lot of benefits coming from a transparent workplace where employees are also engaged, happy, and feeling like they can, work to their fullest every day. Now, as I mentioned at Front, we really love transparency. I shared that quote from Mathilde earlier, but as you'll see in this image here, it's also one of our core values, along with the other three listed. So how we define transparency at Front is, as it says here, our communication is open, candid, and constructive. And we really want to foster a culture of trust and integrity, making sure that every employee, no matter what department, no matter what team, or what role they have, feels empowered to share their true feelings, feels like they know what is going on, and feels like they have a stake and value in knowing the decisions behind every maybe management goal or even personal goal as well. So just to give you an idea of how we define transparency at Front. Now, we do try to practice what we preach, and that leads me right in to our 10 ways to increase team transparency. Now, before I go into those 10, I'm curious if transparency is defined differently in your all's workplaces, or do you feel aligned with the way that we've just defined transparency? And if you could just type that in to the chat box, just curious if anyone else has additional definitions or insights into how their team defines transparency. Cool. So a lot of people are saying that they define it in a very similar way. Okay, cool. And feel free to use Front's definition of transparency, particularly if you're on a growing team or if that's not a value that your team is currently working towards. Go onto our website and look at our core values, and you can actually take our dialogue related to transparency, or that definition that I showed, and use it for your team. Awesome, thanks everyone. So with that, let's go into our 10 ways. So first and foremost, and this might seem a little convoluted at first, but it is super important to uniform your tech stack. Now, the reason I say this is because I've been on teams where everyone is using different technologies, different places to communicate, and it can make everything very convoluted and confusing. One conversation can happen on platform A while another similar conversation is happening on platform B, and you could never know that they're happening simultaneously. And then you can't communicate together from team A to team B. So one thing that I really recommend is unifying your tech stack. Now, for us at Front, we obviously use Front to do so. And for those of you that are not Front users, Front is a great source for team collaboration. But in addition to all using Front, we also try to ensure that the rest of our product stack is the same. So for instance, we all use Google Docs and have shared Google Drives. We all use GitHub to track product issues, We also have a Trello board where we all go to track the product team's upcoming sprints and what they're working on. So every employee knows where to go for what information and who to contact in regards to that information. So really great. So number 2, keep everyone up to date. Now, a few examples for this. At Front, we do this by having a weekly all hands. Now, this happens every Monday morning at the same time, and it is involving every employee. Now, we do have 2 offices, one in San Francisco and one in Paris, as well as a few remote employees. So everyone knows that on Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, we are going to have our weekly all hands. And here's a little quote from Mathilde, just talking about what we do, but really making sure that we have that engagement and provide updates during the all hands that keeps everyone up to date. And a side note with our all hands here is oh, sorry, did not mean to switch, is that during our all hands, every team leader will present a quick update from their department specifically. So that's something that I really enjoy as a member of the customer success teams. Sometimes I'm not always, speaking with the marketing team or the engineering team on a daily or weekly basis. So it's very helpful to get that overall summary of the week's performance and what the team's goals are for the upcoming week. Now, another way that we keep everyone up to date is quarterly reviews of the company performance. Now, this is a separate meeting from our weekly all hands, but what our team does is at the end of each quarter, the leadership team will go into a very in-depth review of our quarterly goals, what they were, and our performance to reach them. Now, this will be done in a presentation similarly to all hands. So it's a live presentation that is recorded with a deck where all employees will come together and listen. But we call this last quarter up front. And it gives an opportunity for us all to reflect on each team's performance from that quarter rather than going on that weekly basis, which are more kind of weekly updates. Cool. Now, moving on to number 3. This is another one that using Front is a key factor for this, or makes it a lot easier. But sharing team inboxes is a fantastic way to make sure that your team is being as transparent as possible. Now, for those of you that don't know what a team inbox is, I'm sure a lot of you have a contact at email alias or a sales at email alias. I actually have a few examples here from notable companies of forums on their website where an individual can log on, submit a contact message, and it will go to the team. Now, the team inbox is where that message will be delivered. Now, when this inbox is shared with multiple team members, you're easily able to not only triage the information and get the response to that external party as quickly as possible, but you're also able to share the information with other team members. So I really love this as well. And it's great to make sure that you're getting an idea of what people are contacting the company about, what questions they have, and making sure that you're responding from the correct individual. And a fun fact here is all the screenshots that I've added from MailChimp, Y Combinator, Dropbox, Shopify, these are all Front clients. So whatever you're sending a message or inputting in their contact us form, it is going to a Front shared inbox where someone is reading it or multiple people are reading it and then responding back. And for those of you that don't use Front, I just wanted to provide a quick example of how our Front instance looks with these inboxes as well. You'll see that in this example, we have all of the teams listed here. We have our customer success team, professional services, and sales. And then within each team, there's different team inboxes that entire team has access to. So when someone emails customer success, it will go into this inbox and all those messages will appear. And you'll see here in the upper right, there's a few different participants. Those are all the team members of customer success that are reading that information, staying up to date on that information, and then responding to it if necessary. So really quick and easy way, again, to make sure that that information is being disseminated in the best way possible. And also so employees feel involved in what is going on and like they have a stakehold in the process as well. Cool. So number 4 is to understand your company why. So I don't know if anyone on the line is a fan of Simon Sinek. I believe that's how you say his last name. But he has a great, I think, talk on YouTube about understanding your company's vision and why. So why your company does what it does, why you create the product you do, or work towards the vision that you have aligned. So I think a great way to understand your why is to look at your client's feedback. So whether that be your professional services and you have clients, or maybe you're creating a software like Front and you're constantly getting input from existing users, it's really great to make sure everyone at the company, everyone, no matter what team, knows what users are saying about your product. So these are actually two real life examples of product feedback that we've gotten from Front. And we have these shared in a team inbox that, again, everyone can have access to. So everyone at the company can go into our team inbox for feedback and see what users are saying in real time. We also use tags, as you'll notice here, to just categorize that a little bit better. So we know that this user added a comment, is an admin of their account, and is from a small team. And then we can get an idea for what they're saying about Front. Now, we also use this as a great way to track our product requests as well as feature enhancements. So based on what users are saying, why they're saying that, we want to understand what features are being most requested and reported. And we use our tags as well and our integrations with a few other different channels to monitor this. And again, this also makes sure that we're going back to our company why. For us at Front, our why is really to work happier. So we want to make sure that all our client feedback, our upcoming product enhancements are all going back to that end goal in real time. So a great way to make sure that you're consolidating all of that information. Cool. Now, number 5 is to clearly identify metrics for success. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with this process. And if you're not, this is great. We do objectives and key results, OKRs, set on a quarterly basis. And these are done on both an individual and team level, as well as company-wide, which again is what's presented at last quarter at Front. Now, for us, these are shared with the entire company, everyone's OKRs, so you can really get an understanding of what each individual is working towards, as well as which each team is working towards. On an individual level, this can also be very helpful because you can align your individual goals with your team's goals for that quarter to make sure that you're really working towards achieving the same thing. But I do love the transparency element here of sharing these OKRs with the entire company. It's really great to get feedback and see what other people are working on. Now, just to give you an example of how we share our OKRs, this is actually a slide from one of our last quarter at Front's presentations of our product OKRs. So this is just getting a kind of status update of where each OKR is for that particular team. Now, one side note for that and how we use Front specifically to measure our success is you can also build analytic reports to measure individual and team performance within Front. So this is a very helpful way just to get a numerical value on some of your objectives and key results. Again, whether that be for you personally or for the department on a whole, Front is really great for doing that as well. And we actually use a lot of this data to make sure that we're hitting our response times, see how many conversations each individual is replying to. Again, very dependent on the team, but also really powerful to have those numbers with your OKRs as well. Cool. Now, of course, a big part of transparency, in my opinion, is asking and getting feedback from others. So we really love asking for feedback and collaborating in Front by sharing different drafts. So I just did an example here of what it looks like within Front. But you'll see when you're composing a reply to someone, you have the option of sharing that composed message with another team member prior to sending. Now, when you share it, they'll be able to edit it, give comments, add feedbacks, maybe an internal commenting as well, very analogously to a Google Doc. But it's really powerful to get another team member's feedback right away and be able to have all that information in one place. And again, for those of you that don't use Front, this is how we kind of structure it. You'll see that Zach is editing this message and he's sharing it and editing it in real time. Cool. Now, of course, and this aligns with kind of knowing everyone's OKRs, but on an individual kind of daily level, stay up to date on your teammates' work and see what they're working on. So in Front, we have a concept of knowing what your team is assigned from a team inbox. And you can actually monitor each team member's assigned conversations in our first panel here. So a really great way to get an idea of how your team is spending their time or what they're working on is to go here to see their assigned conversations, and you'll actually be able to see what they're replying to and what they have replied to. So really great, again, if you're a manager, to see what each team member is working on. If you're looking at a colleague's messages, I sometimes do this to see how my colleagues are responding to certain types of inquiries. Maybe if I need help or if I have a question, I could look at kind of what they're working on, or even just to see their bandwidth. Obviously, it looks like Adele is pretty overwhelmed here. So maybe instead, if I need help editing a draft, I'll reach out to Corey or Blake, since their numbers are a little bit lower. Now, another way to do this is to follow along on their conversations by actually subscribing to a specific back and forth within Front. So you can see that we have this option called subscribing to a conversation. Now this means that you'll get updates on the specific conversation, any new activity that takes place, even if you're not a direct participant. So as I mentioned, let's say that my colleague is having a really interesting back and forth. Maybe I'm on the sales team and they're having a great pricing conversation with an external user. And maybe I want to monitor that to get some ideas for how I can improve my pricing conversations. I can actually subscribe and then follow that back and forth. I can give feedback in the internal comments as well, but it's a really great way to stay up to date on what your teammates are actually doing in a granular level. And we have a question here saying, when you archive a conversation that you're subscribed to, do you archive it for the assigned person? No, you do not. So we have multiple conversation statuses. So your status, whether it's open or archive, is going to be separate from the other users involved. So if you archive for yourself, even if the recipient hasn't replied, it will still be open for them until they archive the message themselves. Great question, thank you. Okay, cool. Now, number 8 is going to be to ask questions. And not only ask questions, but also make sure that you're creating an open forum for employees to feel like they have the freedom to ask questions and are comfortable doing so. So one thing that we do at Front that I find really helpful is an Ask Me Anything with the leadership team. Now this comes in a couple different varieties. We have a lot of anonymous forums for team members to input questions. Now what we do is every week we get a questionnaire where we can actually ask a question anonymously that will be answered during that all hands every week. If that's not something that you feel comfortable doing, you can also create other forums if you have better ideas, maybe a team shared inbox, although that's not as anonymous, but something that you could think about as well. But really making sure that you have the ability to have employees ask anonymous questions and then have them answered in front of the entire community so everyone is involved. Along with this, and something that I really like, which again is not as anonymous, but our co-founder Mathilde also blocks time weekly on her calendar where any employee can book time with her to ask questions one-on-one. So that's another great forum. Again, if you're not as comfortable asking your question or having it read in a public forum, to go one-on-one with leadership and get your questions answered, or even just understand, their thought process going into the next week or quarter. Now, and I feel like my numbers are off here on my times, but the next one I want to go over, I'm sorry, is get feedback immediately. So at Front, we have this concept of internal conversations, and you can see an example here. I did mention this when we were going over shared drafts, but you can have an internal dialogue with your team completely separate from the external conversation or reply. So this is something that I utilize quite frequently to get feedback, advice, or maybe even give teammates action items. You can do so here. Now, one thing that I do love about comments as well is that they will always live with that conversation. So if a new employee is coming back and looking at previous history, they can see that internal dialogue to get some reference. Or maybe even if you are going back to a conversation that occurred a few months ago, you can have these internal comments always there. And here as well, another great tip that we use at Front, which I know sounds scary at first, but I really like it, is to give each other access to your work. Now, at Front, I know I mentioned that we have the concept of team inboxes where your entire team has access, but we also have private inboxes as well, like my Whitney@frontapp.com, which is only visible to me. Now, with these private inboxes, you have the ability to delegate individuals who can read those messages that come into your private inbox and have access to them. Now, this is a very high level of transparency, which obviously will not work for every employee due to some confidential information or every team, but it is a great way to make sure that all your work is being covered. For example, I actually have my manager shared on my inbox at all times. So if she needs to go in and reply to a client for me, maybe it's an emergency situation, she can do so. I see a lot of our end users using these delegations, particularly when someone goes out of town. So you can actually delegate your inbox to a few different team members to make sure they can triage your incoming messages for you. But it is really great. Also, if you're working in a scenario where you have an assistant or a scheduler or something like that, delegating your inbox to that individual is really, really great. And along with delegating your inbox, we also recommend giving everyone access to your schedule. This is not as scary in my opinion, but at Front, we make sure everyone's calendars are public. So you can pull up any other employee's calendar, obviously to schedule a meeting, but maybe also see how they spend their day. Not to be creepy, but that's something that I do sometimes is I'll just look at another team member's calendar, be like, oh, they're having 3 client calls today. Maybe I should do that a little bit more, or maybe understanding how a member of the product team structures their day. It's really great to know what everyone's working on and how they work best. The screenshot I have here is actually Mathilde, our CEO and co-founder, as I've mentioned. Her calendar is always public, but what she does as well is also take data related to how she spends her time every week. So she segments it into different categories of activities and then adds up how much time she's spending on each one. So it's really interesting to get an idea of how our CEO is spending her time and maybe what I can learn from that as well. And it is really powerful to have this for someone like a co-founder or CEO, again, to understand the company's focus and vision from their perspective and where they want to spend the most of their time. Okay, and our final item here is going to be to celebrate success and failures as well. So at Front in our weekly all hands, one component that we do every week is our weekly awards. And during that, we will have what we call a Frontier of the Week, who is nominated by other employees, someone who during that week went above and beyond, maybe accomplished an amazing project, maybe they just got married. It could be personal or professional success as well. And we will then read off what each member is being mentioned for and have one winner as well. So really great, again, to celebrate the success of every individual from any team, but do that on a company-wide level to make sure everyone is getting an idea of what success looks like at Front. Now, in addition to that Frontier of the Week, we also have a Stumble of the Week. And this is one that is self-nominating, where every week an employee who messed up, stumbled, maybe did not perform to the best of their ability or did not complete a task as they wished they did, will actually get up in front of the entire company and explain what happened. And that is called our Stumble of the Week. So 2 ways to celebrate both successes and failures, again, being completely transparent and honest. It also creates an environment of feeling really comfortable because not only are we celebrating each other, but we're also understanding that we're all human and we all make mistakes and it's okay, and we can all learn from them as well. Cool. Well, that is the end of our 10 different items there. We do have a lot of time now for questions. So I want to open up the line for questions related to the Front product, Front's company culture, anything that I went over in the presentation. I'm already reading questions. Please let me know. I would love to hear it in the chat. Or even if you guys want to share a few things that you're going to start implementing with your team, what really stood out to you from the presentation? Were there different suggestions that you hadn't thought of before, or you definitely want to make sure you start doing? Does everyone on the line use Front, or are there some people who are still not using? So we have a question here saying, what are the best practices in getting a team to implement a culture of this transparency? That's a great question. Now, for me, I think that a lot of this comes from the leadership at the top. At least for me, when I joined Front, I came from a company that was not as transparent, but I immediately started benefiting from the transparency up front because of how much Mathilde shared, like having her calendar public, or doing the weekly all hands with updates from each department, celebrating both the Frontier of the Week and the Stumble of the Week in that all hands, as well as my manager as well. So with my manager, I have weekly one-on-ones where she is very open and honest about kind of what she's working on for the team, what her goals are for the week ahead and the quarter ahead. And that's where I really think the change happens, is with the leadership, and then it trickles down to the individual employees. So for those of you that are not in as much of a transparent workplace, if you're in a leadership position, I encourage you to take a few of the things we went over today and start implementing them. And maybe just start very small, maybe with a weekly all hands where you do updates from every department, and maybe like an Ask Me Anything anonymous forum where employees can submit questions. But I do think it has to start from the top. And we have a question here. Is there a good time for being transparent? As managers, should we share everything, decisions, and talks? So this is an interesting question and something that we've actually discussed at Front. And I definitely think that there's a concept of maybe being too transparent, and I think that happens when it impedes individuals' ability to work. So I think it's important to understand what is necessary to share with everybody and what just isn't going to really affect them. You don't want everyone in the company to be bogged down with decisions or dialogues or discussions, but I do think it is important to share major decisions with everyone. So again, this is something that probably differs from each workplace, but a lot of it has to do with what you deem most important for everyone to know, related to maybe the direction of a company or the goals, etc. But obviously there's a lot like hiring processes, confidential information, or decisions with employees leaving or coming that probably don't need to be as transparent to the entire org, but again, is kind of at your discretion. Oh, awesome. Someone said they're looking forward to delegated inboxes. Yeah, please do this. It's really great for onboarding and training. So it's really great. And someone asked, how do you implement an anonymous forum where employee trusts that they're truly anonymous? Good question. At Front, we use a simple survey that is anonymous. And I don't know, I mean, it does require some trust from your end users to know it's anonymous, but in the survey, it doesn't require you to add your name or email. So that's kind of one way. Another way that you could do this is to actually go very old school maybe and have a question box where employees can actually write down their question and submit it. And that way there's no kind of like electronical source. That could be another way as well. But it does take, again, some trust. And someone asked, how do you create an Ask Me Anything forum? Yeah, we just use Typeform, but I'm sure you could do like SurveyMonkey as well, and just have a open forum where it says, what question do you want to ask? Any other detail? Who do you want to answer this question, if anyone? And that is what is submitted. So we just use like a Typeform. Yeah, Front does not allow you to create the survey, but you can have the responses from the survey go into a Front shared inbox if that's something that you would like. And we had a question just on the Front product. Can messages be delegated on a round robin? Yes, they can. And that's something that you would actually set up with Front rules. So I would actually recommend going to our Front rules directory to get an idea of how to set that up. And if you just Google Front rules directory, that will come up as well. These are great questions, everyone. Thank you so much. I love it. What other questions do we have? Now, since a lot of you are Front users, I do encourage you to use a lot of the features that we talked about in this presentation if you're really looking to promote team transparency. So like delegating the inboxes, sharing drafts, making sure you have all team inboxes shared, using internal comments. Those are really easy ways and features we have built into the product that are easy ways to get transparency. So someone asked, how are analytics tracked? So it's analytics directly within Front related to an individual and team member's actions. So there's a lot of different components of analytics ranging from reaction time, so how long it took you to react to an inbound message, to even how much time or how many conversations you replied to over the course of a specific amount of time. So it's all based on your usage within Front, but there are different kind of categories as well. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I would encourage you to, again, look at our help forum. And if you just type in analytics, there's a lot of information related to the specific components that you can measure in analytics. Oh, great question. So we have a question related to analytics asking what's the difference between reaction time and response time. So reaction time is going to be an internal metric. So it's basically how long it takes someone to react to an inbound conversation. So how long it took you to maybe assign it to a team member, add a tag. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've replied. It just means that you've acknowledged that that inbound message has come in. Now, alternatively, response time is going to be that external reply. So when you actually sent that message, that is going to be the response time. Now, if you archive the message without sending, that will also be the response time as well if a response is not necessary. But it is really the difference between an internal reaction and an external reaction in terms of time. Cool. Any other questions as we finish out our session today? Again, everyone should get a recording within the next 24 hours. Please feel free to share it with anyone on your team. And I really, really appreciate everyone's time today. I hope you found the session helpful. If you have feedback for how we can improve our sessions, let us know. Or if there's any content that you would like to see in the future, we would love to hear from you. But with that, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day all over the world. If you're in San Francisco, let us know. Come see our Lego sets. And thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.